Frank Sinatra. Just saying his name brings to mind the glitz of old Hollywood, the velvet voice behind My Way and Fly Me to the Moon, and a swagger that defined an era. But beyond the spotlight, the awards, and the endless fame, Frank had another job. One that was more personal, more complicated, and maybe even more meaningful, being a father. He had 3 children, Nancy, Frank Jr., and Tina. Each of them grew up in the orbit of one of the most famous men on the planet. Each of them carried a piece of his legacy in their own way. But they also carried the weight of his name, his absence, and the very public life he lived. Today, we're taking a closer look at Frank Sinatra's children, how they grew up, what they became, and how each of them kept their father's story alive in their own voice. This is not just about Sinatra the icon, it's about Sinatra the dad. Let's start with the oldest, Nancy Sandra Sinatra, born June 8, 1940. She wasn't just Frank's daughter, she was his first muse. If you've ever heard Nancy, with the laughing face, that dreamy tune was inspired by her. But being Sinatra's daughter came with a cost. By the time Nancy was 4 years old, her father's career was booming. He was rarely home, and while the rest of the world was falling in love with the voice on the radio, little Nancy was crying. Because she missed her dad. She once said she'd cry when she heard his voice in songs, because she didn't understand why he was inside the radio and not in the room. Her parents split in 1951, when Nancy was just 11. After that, it was mostly her mom, Nancy Sr., raising the kids. But Frank stayed close. He was on the phone. He showed up. He cared deeply, even if he wasn't always physically there. As a teen, Nancy stayed cautious. She didn't want to embarrass the family. The name Sinatra meant you had to be twice as careful. And when she finally stepped into the spotlight herself, it wasn't easy. At first, her voice didn't match her identity. She was singing in keys too high, with songs that felt too sweet, too polished. But in 1965, everything changed. These Boots Are Made for Walkin wasn't just a hit. It was a cultural moment. Nancy had found her sound, confident, bold, unfiltered. The track hit #1 and made her a star in her own right. From there, she kept climbing. She sang the theme for the Bond film You Only Live Twice. She had her own TV special. And in a beautiful full-circle moment, she and her father recorded Something Stupid together. It topped the charts and made history as the only father-daughter #1 hit in the United States. But Nancy's life wasn't just studios and stages. She married, had 2 daughters, and after losing her husband Hugh to cancer in 1985, she pushed through the grief by throwing herself into work. She wrote a book about her father, re-released music, and even posed for Playboy at nearly 55. Because, why not? Even years after Frank's passing, Nancy kept his memory alive. Grieving was hard, she said, because his face is everywhere. His music, his voice, it just never stops. But instead of running from it, she leaned in. Nancy continues to champion his legacy today. Then there's Frank Jr., born January 10, 1944. He was Frank's only son, and he carried not just the name, but the expectations. It wasn't easy. He grew up loving music, watching his father perform, and learning the ropes of entertainment early on. He studied piano and composition at USC, joined a singing group at Disneyland, and eventually left college to sing with the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra, just like his dad had done decades before. People compared him to Frank constantly, and he felt it. At first, he said, I was in his shadow, but over time, I made my own mark. And that was true. Frank Jr. released his own albums, toured the country, and even appeared on TV and in films. But in 1963, when he was just 19, his life took a terrifying turn. Frank Jr. was kidnapped at gunpoint. The kidnappers demanded $240,000 in ransom, which Frank Sr. paid immediately. What he didn't know was that his son had already been released. The crime shocked the nation. But in a twisted way, the kidnappers thought they were doing the family a favor, hoping the crisis would bring father and son closer. Frank Jr. kept performing after the ordeal, but the most meaningful part of his career came in 1988, when he became his father's musical director. For 7 years, they worked side by side. Frank Jr. arranged the music, ran rehearsals, kept the band tight, and stood just feet away from the legend every night on stage. He said it was his way of giving back. "From the time we're children, our parents provide for us. I finally got to do something for him." They even recorded together on duets, singing "My Kind of Town." After Frank Sr. passed away in 1998, Jr. married briefly, continued performing, and stayed close to the Sinatra name. He guest-starred on shows like The Sopranos and Family Guy, always winking at his own legacy. In 2016, while on tour, Frank Jr. passed away from a heart attack at 72. His sister Tina announced his death with a heartbreaking message, "Sleep warm, Frankie." Last but never least, Tina Sinatra, born June 20th, 1948. On Father's Day, no less. Of all the kids, Tina may have been the most private, but she's also been the quiet powerhouse behind preserving her father's legacy. Her childhood, like her siblings, was shaped by her parents' divorce, but her father made sure to be present for the moments that counted: birthdays, holidays, special trips. She remembers traveling through Europe with him, seeing Times Square for the first time, and being swept into his world of style and magic. She was once accepted into Yale's drama school, but turned it down, choosing instead to study acting under Jeff Corey in California. She also dabbled in music, contributing to the Sinatra family Wish You a Merry Christmas in 1968. Tina got engaged to actor Robert Wagner in 1970, but they never made it to the altar. She later married music producer Wes Farrell, a marriage that ended after just a couple years. Another brief marriage followed in the 80s, but romantic headlines were never her focus. Her true passion was storytelling, especially her father's story. She executive produced the 1992 Emmy-winning miniseries Sinatra, giving audiences a deeper look into the man behind the legend. She also co-produced a 2004 remake of The Manchurian Candidate, one of her dad's most iconic films. After Frank's passing, Tina said something that stuck with fans. "He's still with me. I don't feel separated from him. That's the kind of connection that doesn't end, even with death." More recently, Tina helped revive the Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra family Christmas show and consulted on a Grammy tribute called Sinatra 100. She rarely seeks the spotlight, but she's always there when her father's name is involved, guarding it, guiding it, and making sure it's treated with the respect it deserves. Frank Sinatra left behind more than just records and headlines. He left behind 3 children, each of whom found their own path while carrying the weight of his name. Nancy found her voice and used it to build a music legacy all her own. Frank Jr. faced unimaginable pressure, yet carved out his own audience and stood beside his father on stage night after night. And Tina? She became the guardian of the Sinatra legacy, preserving his story with care and quiet strength. Through all the ups and downs, the fame and heartbreak, one thing stayed true. Sinatra loved his kids deeply, and they loved him right back. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more stories behind the stars, and let us know in the comments. Which Sinatra song means the most to you? Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.